to anyone who has ever left their hometown. Whether you moved away for college or you moved away in your adulthood, that takes real bravery to give up everything that you've known, all the family and friends that you've created in one place, to pick up and build something new someplace else takes real courage. And that's the topic of today's episode. Coming from me, someone who has been born and raised in New Jersey in the New York City metropolitan area, I'm going to share with y'all my experience of living in Los Angeles, California for the last 4 years. Hey y'all, welcome back to the 4 Degrees to the Streets podcast. I'm your host, Jasmine Jones-Bonds, and I'm so grateful that y'all tapped in with this episode again today. I want to ask one quick favor of everybody listening, no matter if you're watching on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, or if you are on YouTube. I am working on growing this channel, our YouTube channel, to 500 subscribers, and I need your help to do so. So whether you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and tap that subscribe button. If you're on a different platform, if you're on Spotify or you're on Apple, keep listening where you are, but search that web browser at the number 4 Degrees Pod, and you'll find us on YouTube. Press the subscribe button there. Help this show grow to 500 subscribers so I can keep spreading all the information about urban planning and how it impacts our day-to-day lives with y'all everywhere that you go. I just moved back to New Jersey. I am currently in a hotel room right now, so excuse me if the audio quality is not up to par and I don't have my wonderful background or my studio space that I was using while I was in LA. But I just moved back to Jersey. I've been here probably like 3 weeks now, and I moved to LA in 2022. Not necessarily on a whim. I had a job offer. I had 2 job offers. One was in DC, one was in LA. I had already spent the summer in DC working for one of the federal departments in DC. And I was like, you know what? Let me take this opportunity to move to LA. I had a cousin who had just moved there from New York, and my best friend had just moved there from Jersey also, both of them in the entertainment industry. That's going to be really important. That is like one of the truisms of LA, is that a lot of people, and a lot of Black people in particular, work in entertainment. This episode is my farewell letter, my love letter to Los Angeles, because LA was a fantastic time for me. Today's conversation, I'm going to share my professional planning experience about the design and the planning of Los Angeles. As someone with a trained background in city planning and commercial real estate finance, but also my opinion is a bit biased because I grew up in the New York City metropolitan area, specifically in New Jersey. And there are some ways that LA and New York do things differently, in some ways that they do them the same, and some things that LA does better, and some things that New York City does better. And so we're gonna try to get into all those things today. If you're a planner or you're a planning professional, you're gonna find this episode super enjoyable. And even if you're not a planner, I think you're still gonna love it, because I'm gonna be trying to tie my experience, things that are everyday life, to the urban environment, to city planning. And hopefully you'll learn something about the way that cities work, specifically about the way that LA works, and then you'll also be entertained about my hot takes. So let's get into this. As always, this show, the 4 Degrees to the Streets podcast, is a data-based podcast. I am not sitting up here yapping about things that I don't know about. I try to support every single thing I do with data and with references that you can find in the show notes of this episode, because I'm really all about education and entertainment. It's no fun if everybody can't learn a little something. So let's get into the information. High level on LA. When I'm talking about LA, I'm really talking about the metropolitan area. Officially, it's called the Los Angeles, Long Beach, Anaheim Metropolitan Statistical Area, which basically includes LA County and Orange County. But sometimes I might be referring to the greater Los Angeles region, which really talks about Los Angeles, Long Beach, Riverside, and that's the combined statistical area. And if I'm talking about LA proper, I will just say the city of Los Angeles. So let's look at it on a map, because I feel like that helps explain things a lot. The greater Los Angeles area includes San Bernardino County, Riverside, Orange, Los Angeles, and Ventura counties. And these stretch as far west as 60 miles from the coastline. And the Los Angeles, Long Beach, Anaheim, California metropolitan area includes just Los Angeles and Orange County. LA Metro, which is LA and Orange County, is the second largest metropolitan area in the United States. It has just about 12 million people. It's only second to my favorite place, New York City, which has over 19 million people. One of the biggest differences right off the bat when you're talking about LA and New York is the size of the metropolitan area and what land it covers. That California, LA, Long Beach, Anaheim, California MSA is really just Southern California. It's all in the same state of California. Versus the New York metropolitan area, which is actually officially called the New York, Newark, Jersey City, NYNJPA metropolitan statistical area, because it includes multiple counties in New Jersey, all of the 5 boroughs, plus Yonkers and Long Island, and it includes this small little county in Pennsylvania in which people commute from. And so when we're talking about metropolitan areas, it's important to note that from a jurisdictional and governmental perspective, the New York metropolitan area is dealing with multiple different bodies of government. You have 2 different governors, sometimes 3 different governors involved in decision making, plus a countless number of mayors and county officials, versus in the LA region, it's everybody's in the same state, the same governing body. Just for example, both of those cities, LA and New York, held FIFA games, New York holding the final match of the World Cup. And just to put it in reference, the SoFi Stadium had to be renamed the Los Angeles Stadium, and it only involved really the mayor of LA and the mayor of Inglewood, for which the games were physically located. But the coordination for the FIFA games in what they called New York was really at MetLife Stadium, which is in New Jersey. And so the stadium was called the New York, New Jersey Stadium, which pissed everybody in New Jersey off. But that's the point, that coordinating for something like that, a tourism event that's going to bring hundreds of thousands of people to a region, had to involve the coordination between both governors of New York and New Jersey, as well as a countless number of mayors, to get people to and from the games. And so a lot of people were flying in from all these different places expecting to be in New York, and it was right there in the Meadowlands, baby, right in New Jersey. I promise you this episode won't be all about data, but I do think it's important to get some facts off the high level, just straight off the top. LA and New York are comprised of different population demographics. So of those 19 million people that are in the New York metropolitan area, 26% of them identify as Hispanic or Latino versus nearly 48% in Los Angeles. 43% identify as white in the New York metropolitan area versus just 30% in the LA area. The black population in the Los Angeles metropolitan area is only at 6%. 6% of the LA metropolitan area's population identifies as black versus 15% in New York. And then LA and New York have similar populations in terms of people who identify as Asian American, 17% in LA and 12% in New York. So what that tells me is there is a difference of how racial groups and ethnic groups are dispersed across the country, with different populations being in New York. Right in New York, the Hispanic population identifies mostly as Caribbean, right? So they might be Puerto Rican, Dominican, Cuban, versus the Hispanic population in LA identifies as mostly like Central American and South American, Mexican, Honduran, being people from El Salvador, different races and ethnicities in that regard. But it definitely shows you how the culture in those spaces can be different, because you can't find some Cuban foods in LA. You definitely can't find some fire Mexican foods in New York. It just depends on where you are and how the races and ethnic groups are organized. The next piece that I want to talk about in terms of how LA and New York are broken down is employment. So I'm always looking at the census data when it comes to employment and the NAICS codes in particular. And so the top 3 industries in LA are education, healthcare, and social services, professional services, and then arts, entertainment, recreation. versus the top three in New York: education, professional services, and then retail trade. And so it generally tracks with our perception of LA and New York, right? Both of them understanding that they have a lot of professional industries. But I think where it gets interesting is that for LA, you have arts and entertainment in there, also in the top three, versus in New York, you have retail and real estate and finance. And so that really does show you the power of Wall Street, the power of Midtown, and the power of Hollywood, the power of all those studios. Because you definitely see the employment spans, people drawn who are in arts and entertainment to LA more than people who are drawn to real estate or finance or insurance brokerage being in New York. A few other things that are different about the two regions, and this is one of the things that's my favorite part about LA, is the weather and the climate and the landscape, right? New York, New Jersey is a cold place. It's a cold world out here. It will rain, it will snow, it will sleet, it will thunder, it will lightning. In LA, everything is mild and moderate and calm, and it's 70 degrees and there's no humidity. They do have May gray and June gloom, but 2 months out of the year, that's not a bad time to be without the sun. I think LA also has like a really good understanding of an indoor-outdoor lifestyle because of the weather, right? Every single restaurant, every single cafe has some sort of outdoor seating component, whether they're taking over the sidewalk or the courtyard kind of space inside of their restaurant. Whereas I feel like it took a while for New York, particularly after COVID, you started to see them like doing the parklets and doing the restaurant spaces outside. Because we don't have that year-round weather, it doesn't necessarily make sense from an investment perspective to always have that much of your retail space, of your restaurant space dedicated to being outdoors, when for half of the year you're not even going to be able to use it. But I will always love like waking up and looking at a palm tree, waking up and looking at a mountain versus waking up and the sun not coming out till 1 o'clock. I'm definitely missing that. The places were also established different, right? The founding of the places are totally different, and the history around how the cities became part of the U.S. are totally different. New York is one of the original 13 colonies, right? And so it has a long history from the Dutch settlers who came in the 1600s to establish the Americas, versus LA, which was originally part of Mexico, right? That part of what we now call the United States. California, Texas was part of the Spanish colonization, and then eventually through the U.S. moving, the people who founded the U.S. moving westward in our great expansion, in our westward expansion, Manifest Destiny, if you can go back to your 6th grade history class, that process, we had the Spanish-American War and took over that part of the world and incorporated that city, incorporated Los Angeles into United States of America. And so that difference in how the places were founded, how the places were established, you can see in its everyday passing today. Because New York was originally part of the colonies, it's built up, it's dense, every part of the landscape is utilized. It is designed for commercial, for commerce, for trade, for retail, for profit. Whereas as we moved westward, from just like the U.S. perspective, not taking the perspective of the Spanish, from the Americans' perspective, as we move westward, we started to get an understanding of wanting to preserve landscapes and preserve and conserve land and forests and mountains, which is why California itself has the most national parks in the country. It's the state with the most national parks. It's why in LA there are areas that you just can't build in. It doesn't have a growth area like Denver, but because of the landscape and the mountains and the protected forest lands that are in the general area, you can't build every single where, which also drives the pricing up. I mean, and then obviously there's a difference in how we deal with natural disasters and the types of natural disasters that we deal with. Whereas we have hurricanes like Superstorm Sandy, California and LA receives wildfires and burnings like the Palisades fire and the Eaton fire that just happened in 2025. And then finally, to the thing that we all care about, cost of living. Both places are expensive. I will say that if you can live in New York, you can live in LA. And if you can live in LA, you can live in New York. Because if you got money to spend in one, you can have money to spend in the other. But I will say that your dollar goes further on housing alone in Los Angeles. And let me just give you an anecdotal reason why. In LA, I lived in a studio apartment and I paid under $2,500 a month for rent. And I lived in the center of everything. I lived a few blocks away from Melrose, a few blocks away from the museums, a few blocks away from Beverly Hills. I could get downtown in about 10 minutes. Like, I lived in the center of everything, and I paid under $2,500. You take your little $2,500 to New York, baby, you can't even get in the door. Like, I think that what you get for your dollar, my studio apartment had like 4 separate living spaces, and it had laundry, and it had a pool, and a gym, and a rooftop. You know you ain't getting no pool, you ain't getting no gym, you ain't getting no rooftop. You not getting 3 living spaces for $2,500 in Manhattan, which is essentially where I lived. I would describe that West Hollywood area as basically being Midtown Manhattan, right? In terms of trying to mirror one place to another. You can't even get in the door. There's nothing. If you go on Street Easy right now, I don't even think you can find anything for under $2,500, let alone something that has amenities. So just from a cost of living perspective, both are wildly expensive, right? Like, I'm sitting at a hotel, and across the street is a new apartment building for which the 1 bedrooms are $2,700, and I'm in New Jersey. So it's definitely a very expensive place to live, both coasts. But I do think that your dollar goes further in LA than it does in New York, because you're able to just get more for the same price. Getting into some of the planning issues that I think I've seen in Los Angeles, there are a lot. Now, every metropolitan area has its planning issues, whether you're living in Atlanta, where the issue is transit access and sprawl, or you're living in New York, where the issue is flooding and quality of infrastructure, the aging of our infrastructure, or you're living in LA, where the issue is wildfire risk, walkability, and I think the biggest planning issue is the jobs housing imbalance. So the jobs housing imbalance is a planning term, a planning jargon that basically means it's the measure of the number of jobs in a particular area relative to the number of workers in that same area. Said differently, a jobs housing imbalance or a jobs housing mismatch is when, over a period of time, large numbers of jobs but relatively few housing units are created, and vice versa. Large numbers of housing and not a lot of jobs are created in a particular region. So let me just share another anecdotal story about how this works. One of my coworkers drove every single day 2.5 hours to work. Drove in her car all alone for 2.5 hours one way and then 2.5 hours back to her house. Reason being is that she lived in Lancaster, California. Lancaster is in the Antelope Valley of Los Angeles County. It's like tucked away really, really far near Palmdale also. And it's an area in the desert that is very affordable to live, especially compared to the city of Los Angeles. And for her, she had a family of 5. I think she had 3 kids and a husband. And so for the space that they needed, right, at least 4 bedrooms, to get that in LA City or Inglewood City or Hawthorne City would have been astronomical. So instead, she drove the 70 plus miles in traffic every single day to our office in the city of Los Angeles and then back home. Now, just to put that into some context, Rutgers University is about 30 miles from Manhattan, so twice the distance. Plus, the traffic in LA is unheard of. She would be sitting in traffic for the most of that time. That trip should not take 2.5 hours. But because so many people have to live that far away from the city center, from LA, in order to find decent housing that's affordable to them, there's so much traffic going from east to west towards the coast that housing ends up getting pushed out into the desert cities of the east, and all the jobs end up getting concentrated close to the water in the west. What that ends up happening is there's a huge mountain formation in the middle of the beach in the desert, and so you have to drive quite literally over the mountain and through the woods to get to the other side. Let me put it in perspective, give you some numbers so you can go along with it. Today in Lancaster, I just did a Redfin search. Redfin is a real estate company. You can have them help you find a house or sell a house. You can buy a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bathroom, 2,000 square foot house on an 8,000 square foot lot that already has an in-ground pool for $500,000 in Lancaster. If you took your same $500,000, it's funny, but it's not funny. If you took your same $500,000 and you wanted to move to the city of Los Angeles, you could right now get you a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment for 920 square feet. That would cost you $499,000. Or you could do a major gut reno. I'm talking about knocking down walls, knocking down everything, basically a flip and gentrify a neighborhood essentially in South Central for $460,000. The numbers don't even compare. So if you're a person with a family that's growing, or you already have a family and you're making $100,000 at a professional job, right? You work in real estate, you work in finance, you work in banking, or you work in entertainment, and you finally made your first 6 figures and you're crushing it, you still need to move 70, almost 80 miles away and drive 2.5 hours in traffic. And my coworker at that job was not the only one I knew. There were 2 other people doing that same commute at that same office. And at my previous job, my other coworker, he was driving 2.5 hours, but this time coming all the way from South Beach, South in Orange County. So that just shows you that, like, the concept of driving until you qualify, right? Drive until you qualify for a mortgage, you qualify for housing, drive until you can afford, is really a thing. And what makes it so sad is because LA has what I would consider to be poor transit options, you really end up having the only option being that you have to sit in your car and drive in traffic for 2.5 hours to get to work, because the alternative is you and your family splitting a 1-bedroom 900 square foot apartment in the city. It's ridiculous, but it's so common. The Southern California Association of Governments, which is the MPO, the Regional Planning Association, the Metropolitan Planning Association for the city of LA and its surrounding cities, has been studying this problem forever. I learned of the job housing imbalance when I was in graduate school. So then to be able to see it play out live in the city was crazy. To realize that my coworker, when I got up in the morning to go work out, was getting up in the morning to drive to the office. Like my 2 hours in the beginning of my day, what people be online talking about their 5 to 9 before they go to work. Her 5 to 9 was getting dressed and getting in the car and driving to the office. There was nothing else. Think about the amount of time that's stolen from you because you have to drive in your vehicle the whole time. But there are some things that the New York Metro can learn from Los Angeles. Some of them, they just can't be replicated, like how to not have humidity, how to have beaches that actually have clean water, how to have large mountain views and sunshine all year round. Those are things that LA has that we just are not going to have over here on the East Coast. But there are some things that I think we on the East Coast can learn from LA, and that being the desire to tax ourselves for social benefit. Now, I had the pleasure of voting in LA, and if you've ever seen a ballot, I wish I had one. In LA, it's like pages long, because there's state ballot, you have all of the candidates, right, that you're voting on, but then they have these special measures or propositions, which are basically like questions to the voters that if you mark yes or no on them, some other policy action happens. So for example, they might have something on the ballot that says, do you think we should raise the real estate tax by this much so that we could pay for this? Yes or no? One of the ones that passed recently was called Measure A. Basically, with Measure A, they asked the county of Los Angeles, all of the people who live in the county on their ballot, because you have state questions, county questions, and city questions. There's all the people in the county. Would you accept a 0.5 cent increase in the sales tax so that it could support homelessness services? This was in 2024. It was called Measure A. It passed. The voters of LA County agreed to a 0.5 cent increase in their sales tax to support homelessness and homelessness services. Now, what I think is interesting about this, and where I have to put like a little caveat, is they don't have toll roads in California, right? So like you can drive from LA to San Francisco, which is like a 6-hour drive, and not pay a single toll. If you leave Rutgers University and you drive to Trenton, to the capital, you already owe them $4. Like, we already spend a lot more money on a day-to-day basis in how we drive. But I will say that for the most part, their real estate taxes are fairly the same. Their gas tax is higher than ours, right? California has the highest gas tax when you go to the pump. And their income tax is higher than ours on the East Coast. And they're still willing to tax themselves for the public good. And I feel like what's different about the way that they go about it versus us is, right, we're paying the congestion pricing, for example. That's a new policy that was implemented in our region. But that congestion pricing is really not benefiting us today or in the future. It's fixing infrastructure that we've neglected and has all these years and decades of deferred maintenance that now we have to tax ourselves to fix it, because if we don't, we won't be able to go forward. Whereas the way that I think that they tax themselves in California is more of like a, once we raise this money, we're going to be able to implement this today. And so that 0.5 cent sales tax increase is supposed to generate $1 billion annually within a year. And it's supposed to be split up in some really interesting ways, which we can talk about. But it says 60% is going to a comprehensive homeless service, which includes initiatives and programs and services direct to the homeless, data and research, and then only 3% to housing production, and another 35% to the Housing Agency for Affordable Housing and Prevention, which is La Casa. And I think we can always debate, right, like how is this breakdown of this $1 billion? I feel like 3% for local housing production is probably too low. But the point being that in California, in LA particularly, there's a willingness. This measure passed. People accepted an increase in their sales tax when they already have some of the highest sales tax in the country at 9.5%. So they are willing to tax themselves for social good. And I think that's something that we can pick up on the East Coast. Although I recognize that we already pay for a lot of quote unquote public good every single day. We pay on the train, we pay on the roads, we pay at the pump, we pay everywhere. Everything you gotta pay. But I think that there's something to be said about the city asking you first, right? Like, would they have put congestion pricing on the ballot and given us all the option to vote on it? I'm not too sure. By the way, check out my episode with Tiffany Ann Taylor, who is formerly with the Regional Plan Association, on congestion pricing. She was a fantastic guest to have on the show. We had an audio only episode. This was back in my audio only days, but a great conversation, which I will link for y'all right up here. What is the biggest planning misconception about LA? Or what is the biggest misconception about Los Angeles? I would say, from my urban planning perspective, putting on my urban planner brain, but also putting it with my bias for New York versus LA, but also my experience living in LA, I would say that the biggest misconception about LA is that it doesn't have density. It doesn't have dense neighborhoods. LA may not be as dense as Manhattan or as dense as Brooklyn, but it is still a place with good population density and a strong street grid. New York City is the most dense city in the United States with 27,000 people per square mile, compared to Los Angeles City proper, which is much lower at just 7,000 people per square mile. But LA does have a lot of neighborhoods. When you go into the map and you dig further and you zoom in, like I'm doing right here, LA does have a lot of neighborhoods where the census tract has over 15,000 people per square mile. Particularly on the east side of the city in East Hollywood near the 101, all of East LA from Los Feliz and Silver Lake into Boyle Heights, and in South Central, Inglewood, Ladera Heights, Baldwin Hills, all of those black neighborhoods in the south of the city, plus the South Bay as well. You can see Carson and Hawthorne have a concentration of those census tracts with over 15,000 people per square mile. And so they all have a higher than average citywide population density, and that's not insignificant. It's not insignificant that there are a lot of neighborhoods in LA where you can find really dense communities, really walkable communities with street grids. And I think that's the biggest misconception, because when you land at LAX, you get in a car and you drive around the city the whole rest of your trip. How often do you ever even get on the train? My kind of non-urban planning take and misconception about LA is that LA is a fake place. I think we've all heard that it's super Hollywood, everybody's stuck up and superficial. And I will say that if that's the lifestyle you want, that's the lifestyle you're gonna have. That because of the Hollywood industry, because there are celebrities who are there and people who are aspiring to be celebrities, it's a place where people go to chase their dreams, you can definitely end up in a circle, in a network of people who are superficial, who are always looking to take something from someone else, only wanting to speak to you if they have an opportunity that you can give to them. I've definitely caught myself being in those environments. But if you leave that Hollywood scene, like if you literally leave Hollywood, the area that is in Hollywood Boulevard and Sunset Boulevard and Cahuenga and Franklin, if you actually leave that area in that general vicinity and you go into the neighborhood, you go into Los Feliz, you go into Silver Lake, you go into Boyle Heights, you go into Inglewood, you go into South Central, you go into Baldwin Hills, you will meet some of the most genuine and authentic people who are from LA, who will laugh at you about Hollywood and tell you how you've been missing out on a real cultural experience because you've been attaching yourself to the industry of entertainment. What am I grateful for my time living in Los Angeles? I think that the biggest lesson I learned from living in LA is the thing that I'm most grateful for. The biggest lesson that I learned from living in LA is that I am capable of being an entrepreneur. When I started this podcast, I literally started it saying, I'm not a podcaster. I don't want to be a podcaster. I just want to have a thing where I can talk about urban planning. To now being like, yes, I'm a podcaster. I want to grow to 500,000 subscribers, so help me get there, y'all. But something about the culture of Southern California is very entrepreneurial. For a state that has the highest income tax, LA consistently ranks in the top 5 for regions of self-employed individuals and entrepreneurs. The United States Census Bureau has a database, a survey that they collect called the Non-Employer Statistics. And those data tables were looked at by a think tank, Chamber of Commerce, that found that 15% of the workforce in Los Angeles identifies as being self-employed. That ranks LA as having the 5th highest number of self-employed workers in the country, with the other 4 cities being in Florida. It's important to note about Florida because Florida doesn't have any state income tax. So the fact that LA is second basically in having the highest number of self-employed individuals to a state with no income tax is relevant, because that means people are choosing to earn a living independently and being taxed excessively for it. So being in an environment in which my immediate friends and immediate associates were being independent, were going out and getting deals and leaving their 9 to 5 was super motivating and super encouraging to me because it allowed me to see what's possible. I've talked on this podcast about my family growing up and being factory workers and being like, you got to get your good government job and hold on to it till the wheels fall off. And I'm starting to like break from that shell and get more comfortable in the concept of how can I earn based on my capabilities alone. And so I'm forever grateful to the professionals in LA who showed me that world, the world of independence, the world of entrepreneurship. The other thing I think about LA that drives that entrepreneurial spirit is the weather, right? When it's sunny every single day, something about that is encouraging you to figure out how you can be out there enjoying that sun. Like how you can still make a living, but still be outside enjoying the sun and not be caught up indoors while the palm trees and the mountains and all that is out there behind you. Whereas when you live on the East Coast and there's winter, you're like, I'm just happy to have my job and go somewhere to sit down. I think that brings a different level of hustle out of you because the sun is always shining. Now, I talked a lot about LA, what it has, what it doesn't have, but this is my farewell letter to LA. I loved that city. I would always recommend for anybody to just take a break and leave their hometown. Now, I'm not saying go there with the clothes you have on your back, but I am saying if you can figure out a way to earn a living, to earn a decent amount of money in a new place, you should 1000% try it. If not just for to say, I did it, I tried it, I didn't like it, I'm going back home. For me, LA was a fantastic experience. It really has helped to round out my urban planning knowledge, having grown up in the East Coast, going to grad school in Atlanta, and then having spent the bulk of my adulthood in Los Angeles. I've gotten to see how they do planning on the West, how they do planning in the South, and I already know and have learned and experienced how we do planning on the East Coast. And I'm not joking, but Chicago, I'm coming for you next, dog. I need to learn how we do planning in the Midwest and in the Great Lakes region for sure. Now, every metropolitan area has its problems. Next week, I'm going to be touching base on New York, spinning the block to talk about where New York can be better, how New York is winning right now, and what are the planning problems and opportunities that the region has to make sure we can stay being the greatest city in the world. Before we go, a reminder, my one ask, I have one thing I want you to do. Subscribe to the 4 Degrees to the Streets podcast on YouTube. If you're watching this on Spotify, thank you so much. If you're watching this on Apple, thank you so much. If you're watching this on another platform, I appreciate you for finding me. When you finish watching here, take a minute, type in the 4 Degrees Pod in your YouTube browser and press that subscribe button. I am actively working on growing this show to 500 subscribers so that I can continue to bring y'all this fantastic content on associating urban planning with everything in your real lives. You can follow us on YouTube, on Substack, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Apple, and on Spotify at the number 4 Degrees Pod. Peace out, y'all.